Design Advisory Panel meeting. And just to remind you that this meeting is live streamed and recorded for the public. This is also going to be a rather long meeting. I really appreciate the panel members coming in early at 4 to handle this, because we've got 3 presentations this evening. And so what I'd like to do is hold a 5-minute recess. We'll just see how long these, I'm going to play it a bit by ear. We'll see how long the first presentation takes. And somewhere in there between presentations, we'll take 5 minutes off, because I'm sure we'll all need a little break in there. So I'll let you know about that. Now, we do have a introduction. We do have a late item. There was an addendum to the agenda, and did everybody, all the panel members, receive that? I think so. Okay, good. And that included another set of minutes that we're going to look at tonight, as well as a few corrections on the presentations. So let's move on to the minutes. What I'd like to do is start with the minutes from January 13th. That was the ones that came in the minutes that were with the addendum. So everybody have a chance to read those, and was there any changes or corrections that needed to be made? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to accept them as presented? Kevin, and the seconder, Tony. Great, all in favor? Aye, okay, all passed. And the second set was from January 27th, our last meeting. And any corrections or changes that anybody noted for those minutes? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to accept those as presented? Kate, seconded by Jill. All in favor? Great. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've got 3 presentations tonight, and the first that we've got is for a property at 77 Chapel Street, and Caleb Horn will be introducing this one. Go ahead, Caleb.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the first application on tonight's agenda is development permit 1256 for 77 Chapel Street. The property is zoned DT5 Chapel Front, and the relevant design guidelines are the general DPA design guidelines and the downtown urban design plan and guidelines. The proposal is for a 6-story development with a combined total of 154 dwelling units. The only variance requested is the setback for an underground parking structure, to vary that from 1.8 meters to 0.0 meters. And the applicant may now begin their presentation.
Who's presenting for the applicant?
There will be a combination of myself. My name is Glenn Hill. I'm the architect representing the project, and Greg will also be providing a brief introduction. So, Greg.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone's having a good day. Yeah, we're really pleased to be bringing this project forward. As mentioned, my name is Greg Mitchell. I'm the Senior Development Manager and Senior Planner with Primex Investments. We build, own, and operate rental housing, as well as build other housing where it comes about. And this site in Nanaimo, we're really excited to add it to our already growing portfolio of housing in Nanaimo. So I won't belabor my points too much, but I look forward to hearing Glenn's comments and hearing the rest of your comments this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Hello, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to sit on and listen to our presentation today. I know we're under a bit of a time crunch, so I will just share my screen and we'll get going here. So, is everybody seeing my screen? Okay. So, as you know, this is a 6-story development located at 77 Chapel Street. It's a combination of a rental building and a strata building, which is comprised of 2 separate buildings separated by an internal open-air courtyard, one side of it facing Chapel Street and the other side flanking out onto Skinner Street. The development is a combination, as Caleb said, of 154 units, which is made up of 84 rental units comprising of a mixture of 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and studio units. And we have 70 strata building lots comprising of 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and studio units as well. So a wide range of residential types. I will just sort of flick through our slides here. So as you know, this site is located right in the downtown area, perched up on top of the escarpment. It's the last piece of property that would essentially complete both Skinner and Chapel Street as they merge at the top of the hill in front of the Lockworks. The immediate context is a mixture of recently developed residential projects over the past several years. There is a mix of commercial and civic buildings. Some of note would be the St. Paul's Anglican Church and its significant architectural add-on that was done a couple of years ago. We are, as BHK Architects, we're proud to acknowledge 91 Chapel Street as one of our successful projects a couple of years back. 91 Chapel Street as a residential development plays a strong role in how we've crafted and continued our architectural expression of both Chapel Street and Skinner Street. And then there are a mixture of other 3-story commercial buildings and the law courts, obviously, as most of you know, with funky restaurants like Gina's and various other things peppered around the site. So its connection to Commercial Street is very close, and essentially what we're doing is introducing potentially 154 family types into the downtown, which in turn will, we hope, contribute significantly to the culture of this area by furthering the 61 families that are living at 91 Chapel Street and various others. So it gives you a bit of a context of what we're doing. This site plan gives you a quick visual on the location of our buildings. The topography is quite an interesting and challenging one to deal with when it comes to placing buildings on the property. The Skinner Street is significantly lower than Chapel Street. Chapel Street rises up the hill to the north, and Skinner Street rises downhill to the center at Benson, which you see here, and then rises up to the north where the two meet at a sharp point. To give you a bit more understanding of what that looks like, here is the rental building. This is the 2 buildings forming the strata building and the internal courtyard and the external public courtyard and a public park space. So before I get into looking at the actual form and character, I'd like to give you a quick overview of our materials. We have a backdrop of material in gray tones through the hardy panels, and then we have a select choice of signature materials that are specific to at the street level and identifiers of the major articulation of the building. So we have brick at the lower levels with glass entryways, storefront glass entryways. We have wood look metal panels, and then we have a signature or an interesting choice of material for privacy for all of the residential decks. It would be a perforated panel product that would allow light through, but would provide some privacy for people sitting out on their deck. So fairly muted tones as a backdrop, and then significant contrasting wood look, warmer materials as the material of choice as we articulate around the building. So again, to illustrate the complexity of the site, these site sections illustrate the change in elevation as you rise up Chapel Street. So this is 91 Chapel Street, which is just being constructed. This is our strata building, which butts up to it. 91 Chapel Street, by the way, was built to a 0 lot line. So we're sort of repeating that by starting at the 0 lot line and extending the street forward. there's a break in the site, and then the rental building stands as a standalone building at the north end, and then at the very top of Chapel Street, at the top of the elevation, is the public park. This is the same public park looking at Skinner Street. You can see as you drive, as we move south, it comes down significantly to the parking garage entryway, which is located at the bottom of the two-way portion of Skinner Street, which we strategically located it there in order to take advantage of two-way traffic and not rely on all of our residents or people arriving in car coming down the one-way street. Skinner Street turns into a one-way street, and then we rise back up towards the Skinner side of 91 Chapel Street, which is our flanking building to the south. A quick example of the grade changes. Here is a little diagram illustrating section cuts through the site. So here you can see Chapel Street at this elevation, cutting through our rental building, and then the drop. This is actually the road in elevation as it drops down in grade towards Benson. And then the second section gives you a look slicing through the site, looking into the internal courtyard of the Strata building. Here's Chapel Street, Building 1, which is the Harbour View building, the courtyard linked by its exterior walkways, and then the Benson View building, and the elevation of Skinner Street dropping down with the little townhomes integrated into the street frontage along Skinner. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview of the complexity of the site and the elevations that we're working with. We've created some view analysis from the general context in and around the property. This is a view from Comox looking back towards the property. You can see the existing, this is the Front Street high rise. And then this is 91 Chapel over here, and then our building kind of connecting into it, and the rental building notched in behind the buildings that are on the other side of Skinner Street. This elevation gives you a view from coming back up the hill on the other side of Terminal, looking back at 91 Chapel Street, and then our building integrated into the hillside at the top of the escarpment. And then another view from closer to the bridge as you come across Terminal, looking back towards the downtown site, and our building integrated up onto the hill. So overall, the skyline has not been significantly interrupted by the sort of the massing and scale of our project. Zooming in a little bit, this gives you a bit of an overview of Skinner Street, 91 Chapel Street as constructed last year, and then the integration of our Strata building and the townhomes, creating that street level presence down at the lower level. Our parking entryway, access up the private courtyard with a lookout in between the buildings, and then the rental building as it notches into the hill as we rise back up to the north. This is an overview of Chapel Street, looking up to the north. This is the law courts. To give you a reference, we've got park space at the north end. A public plaza has been developed in front of the rental building adjacent to the public courthouse, with the ambition that this would be a pleasant place to go and have lunch or hang out, sit on a wall and enjoy some fresh air. And then our Strata building, as it joins and completes the architectural presence and street wall of 91 Chapel Street. And I can talk really quickly about the form and character of this as we go. But, so zooming in onto some of the streetscape spaces, this is the north end of the Strata building on Chapel Street. This wall has been identified as a significant place for public art. That would be a large flanked wall looking into the public park. So the ambition is that this would have a significant presence and animate and provide some culture to the space that we're providing in front of the rental building. In the background, you see into the private courtyard, which is separated by a public-private separation, but again sharing that sort of view corridor through the buildings. The form and character of our building has been informed by 91 Chapel Street. you've maybe seen the sort of the massing of that. But what we've done is we created a sort of an abstract version of that, so we can continue the rhythm of the building forms, masses, and scale as we continue along Chapel Street and as we notch in to the grade as we rise up. This view kind of spins around, showing the public art location, the public park or plaza space in front of the primary entry for the rental building, which is signified by this articulation and change in material. The view corridor through and the private courtyard for the strata building. You can see, and I believe we have Scott, our landscape architect, with us today, who can speak a little bit more about the articulation of the planting. But we've navigated the grade rising up via ramps, so we're making the entire plaza as accessible as we possibly can. And that allows us to introduce significant planting areas where we can green in this space and have areas to stop and rest, sit beside the plants, and otherwise enjoy that space. And then the view along Chapel Street to the north illustrates how we've taken the architectural form and character of 91 Chapel Street and provided an articulation which sets what we feel is a very interesting rhythm of forms to scale and break down the overall massing of the building. And obviously, where the sidewalk breaks away from the main level of the strata building, we've created another accessible plane where all of the little live work units could be accessible from the primary entry point back along this way. So that's that natural notching that has to happen along Chapel Street in order to create accessible plaza spaces in front of the main floor. A quick shot of the courtyard space that looks back towards the rental building. The idea is that this would be an AstroTurf putting green picnic spot for the residents living in the strata building. This would be a private area that would be separate from the public plaza out on Chapel Street. And then as we spin around to Skinner, you'll see the same articulation where we have 91 Chapel Street on the right-hand side. These are the two-story townhomes with their private front door entryways, little balconies as they loft away from the street level, and then little steps and garden spaces for those townhouses to kind of interface at street level and at the human scale. The change in materials happening here with our backdrop, and then the abstract of this form kind of taking its rhythm down the front of the building, and then our strata building in the background. As we spin around to the other side, the rental building is the prominent feature at the north end of the site. This is you can see here, this is the public park space where we may anticipate some additional public art. We can see where that goes. But the articulation of this north end we paid particular attention to it in order to kind of provide an appropriate scale for the size and the scale of the park on the north side, so that we identified a significant feature of that north end of the rental building as a backdrop to the public park, in the same way that our gable end of the strata building with its public art was a backdrop to the public plaza on Chapel Street. This basically brings us back around to the north end of the site, looking back from where the courthouses are down Chapel Street, the public art here, the potential for public art in the park space in the north end, and then the articulation of our rental building as it finds its placement up adjacent to the public park. I will note that all of the amenity space on the rental building is on the ground floor, has been glassed up. We have gym space, ground floor amenity space, a party room, and a kitchenette. That is all happening on the ground level here adjacent to the park. The ambition obviously is that we would create animation at the street level on Chapel Street and also adjacent to the park. It's an opportunity for people that are living in the rental building to have an amenity space to go to, and then the windows could open, the doors could open, and there could be a potential use and occupation of the public park via the neighboring residences. So That basically gives you the whirlwind version of what we spent the last several months working on. I do want to leave it open as much as I can for questions and clarifications, so I will gladly answer any of your questions. Thank you so much.
Are you going to have somebody do the landscape plan?
Oh, yes, absolutely, of course. Scott, sorry. Just
Usually
Scott, so you...
We just complete the whole presentation, and then we'll do comments from the panel.
And it's ironic, I actually have Scott's landscape plan as part of my PDF, so I can be your page turner, Scott, if you're ready to go.
Sure, yeah, and I think we'll try and stick to this page. Our other plans kind of zoom in a bit, and I'll just get you to go through that. But basically, I think Glenn's presentation has shown the various spaces that we are talking about. And on the plan, you can really see the to the left at the point, sort of our green a little parkette space at the end where the two streets come together. The red circle there, a potential location for some public art. So we have seating on that little plaza space, as well as sort of seating that would be surrounded by trees and planting in that area. And then as you come along along Chapel, between the two buildings is the plaza space that we've developed, and you can see the steps and the ramps to accommodate all mobility issues there, and just trying to create places and seating for people to sit and enjoy. We think that's going to be quite a nice space with some nice lighting at different times of the day. Glenn had some good images of that inner courtyard space with the sort of the turf area there. And one of the reasons we were looking at that as a turf area is there's going to be the idea of maybe kayak storage on site, and it's kind of one of those places that you could put your gear down, wash it off after being in the water, that kind of thing. So sort of a multifunctional space, but could be used for bocce and other things as well. And then on the Skinner side, the landscape there, this is part of our rainwater management plan for the site. And I think if you go to the next plan, it sort of shows that a little bit. Next sheet, please. Yeah, so what we're proposing to do is develop that as sort of a terraced stepping rain garden. We've got a lot of grade change happening there, and we can get access for water to get to those locations. And so we can turn that into an amenity space that, is quite functional for water management, and I think will be quite attractive and quite lively when it is raining. And some of the images show that the type of landscape that we'd be looking at in those zones. Can you go to the next plan there? I think it has sorry. Can we scooch down, Glenn? There's if you keep going, there's an elevation that sort of shows that area. That one right there. So it's just how we're thinking of stepping that landscape, working with grades. We want to get soil volume there for trees, and we can take advantage of that with rain gardens, and the little section below sort of shows how we can do that, and it would all work together to filtering clean water as it steps down. And we probably don't have a lot of time, but if we even want to go back to the main page, the plant material that we're proposing to use is a mix of native and non-native plant species that are adapted to the site conditions. We're going to have different levels of light, different soil volumes, where a lot of this is on slabs, so we'll be using smaller species on slab versus sort of trying to get some larger maples, katsura, even some Gary Oaks at the far end where the two streets come together. So quite a mix of plant material, but just trying to make that fit in with the context of the site and the characteristics of the site that we have to work with. So yeah, I can leave it there, and yeah, if there's more questions, then we'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. If you could maybe stop sharing your screen now. Get a full view of everybody. Okay, great. Now, does any of do the panel members, any of them have questions for the staff about this project? Nothing. Okay, I actually have two questions. First of all, I'm just wondering if Caleb, if you could speak to the parking plans for this area. This project is actually going to take over a whole parkade and a land lot at that sort of pointed tip north end of the property. And it's the streets there are very narrow. And I know that the restaurant uses the parking lot on the north end, and so does the courthouse. So I'm just wondering if you're able to speak at all to the city's plans for the parking in this area once this development's in place.
Yeah, I could speak through the chair briefly to that comment. I may turn it over to Lania as well. But a lot of the conversation around the parking here was reviewed through the previous rezoning application. And as part of that, there was a look at what the parking demand was for the downtown. If I recall, it had been noted the city parkades. There's one at Bastion, and also the one at the conference center. That there was at most times of day still adequate supply to meet demand. It's not in necessarily the immediate area, but it is a further block or two away from the site. Otherwise, I don't know if there was more conversation on the parking than that. Perhaps I will refer to Lania if you were aware.
No, thanks, Caleb. I think that that is the same understanding that I have. It was looked at the time of rezoning, and this applicant will be providing the necessary required parking in accordance with our parking bylaw, if not exceed it potentially. So.
Okay, well, I'd be a little concerned about having enough maybe handicap spots for people getting out of wheelchairs, for example, up in that area to access restaurants or businesses or the courthouse, just because I know there's not a lot of parking on that street. And so maybe, I don't know, reserve spots on the street or something like that, because some people aren't going to be able to walk from the other parkades. But just a note, I know it's not really quite in our mandate to discuss parking, but when something like this does come into the neighborhood, it's going to really affect it. My second question, actually again for Caleb, I'm wondering if you could clarify for me whether the applicants in this case who are proposing public art, now this has come up a number of times in our panel, if they are now required to consult and work with the city cultural staff on selecting artworks, if there's a coordination there yet. I know the city has done some work on that, and there's now, I'm actually part of the working group for public art, so I'm just wondering what the requirements are.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so through the chair, for this specific proposal, there is a requirement to include public art, and that is due to there being a covenant on title registered as a condition of rezoning. So through that process, staff in the culture section will be reviewing, sorry, background noise here, reviewing opportunity for public art as per the community plan for public art.
Great. Okay, really appreciate that. Thanks. So anyway, we'll move on to the panel comments. Just note that there's one variance being considered here, so keep that in mind as you consider your comments and questions. So perhaps Jason, if you'd like to start.
Get unmuted. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am in support of the variance. I think it makes a lot of sense in order to accommodate the amount of parking that you can. Otherwise, that corner becomes very difficult to make use of. Otherwise, I'm actually very appreciative, and I really appreciate the effort and energy that went into the design of the building. I think you did a nice job in trying to break down the scale of the building, both vertically and horizontally, since you're going to have a long street wall there. And I also really appreciate your consideration of the public realm and how you could be a good neighbor and enhance the context around you, and how you played off of and respected the architectural context on the sites around you to make a stronger project. So I really appreciate all those efforts. The only thing I could find that to even harp on a little bit would be the entrance to the rental parkade seems a little forced. But other than that, I think you've done a really nice project, and I think you'll make a nice addition to the neighborhood. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Jason. Kate, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your presentation tonight, the design team. Yes, firstly, yes, I'm in support of the variance, so I'll get that out of the way. And I think I've been waiting to see how you are going to develop the rest of the site, and I really enjoyed the way you've situated the buildings on this narrow site, and in doing so, we're able to create those two little public spaces. I think those are critical to sort of the success of something in the downtown in particular. I'm not going to speak much about the architecture. I do enjoy the perforated sort of screening you've decided to use, metal, for the balconies. I think that's an interesting change from what we see. And I don't mind that it's different from the existing building. I think that adds a nice little detail. But I'll mostly speak to the landscape, and I really appreciate the effort made to make the two public spaces. I do think you may have missed the opportunity on that top north corner. I feel like the design maybe has not been fully resolved. It's a very important corner. It's like your high point of your site, as you know, and it's an important point in Nanaimo. And I would love to see the design sort of reflect the energy of that corner better. Currently, you're kind of crossing it with your paths. And I imagine it's just, you probably haven't had the time, because I'm very familiar with your design firm and you do great work. And I've seen your work down in Victoria, and I'm confident you will do something. But I think I would love to see that resolved a little better and be more bold with the fact that you're on a corner and the top of your site, and it's narrows there. And then secondly, I would agree. I too was the way you've decided to sort of to fence or gate off the private courtyard space to the public plaza. I also wonder about that, and maybe you could add a different kind of screening or fencing that connects more with the architecture, instead of, as it's being shown right now, is just a kind of like a gate and rail fencing. And I'm never a fan of AstroTurf, so I know the constraints. Maybe you can find a way to do something else. So I would love to see that. I'd love to not see that, but I understand you're constrained because you're on parkade. But there's things that could be done, and I imagine you could find a way. My one last thing was, I think on Skinner Street, with the original building, I think the pedestrian experience of the first building was best on Skinner Street, and I'm happy to see that sort of same energy and nuance is continuing up, except for when we hit the parkade entry and the way the parkade entrance has been treated. From the modeling, Glenn, that you showed us, it kind of stood out to me, that blank wall where the garage was. And I know in the landscape plans, there was some reference to using vines to kind of create these green walls. And I saw that you did have some there, but I think that might be how you can solve that problem. If you like focusing on that, trying to get those vines to grow there. I think that suits Nanaimo. We have a lot of buildings that use vines to hide ugly surfaces. So I think it's okay. And that might be an easy solution. But something, I would like to see that treated, because it was really evident for me in a few of the pulled back modeling shots that it stood out from across the ravine, looking back to your project. And lastly, I don't know if it will be possible, but I would say that one of my disappointments with the original project on Chapel Street is that the finishings of the hard surfacing near the entrance were pretty, they weren't high finishings. And it was a bit of a disappointment given the attention that the church put into the finishings of that nice rock wall that grounds it to the street. And I would love to see a little bit more detailing on Chapel Street in whether your pavers or maybe it's not all concrete retaining walls. Maybe there's a little bit of detailing to nod to the old sort of stone footings and walls we see on some of the older buildings. But I just feel like Chapel Street generally is not as successful as Skinner, except for when you then get up to the public space. And I think, I don't know, I have so much to say because I think this is a really great project and it's in a really great spot in Nanaimo. And we just want to see you do a really great job. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kate. Jill, would you like to go?
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What a wonderful contribution these projects are making to the core. I tend to comment on site-wide types of things. I really appreciate the development of the landscape solution, some of the ingenuity in terms of the water runoff, the plaza that you've developed. And I just think the streetscape is going to be, the urban streetscape is going to be really enhanced by this. The only comment that I've had is kind of parallel to Kate's. And the North Park is, I think, a pretty important gateway to the rest of the core. And I see now, my feeling is there is not as much of a hierarchy of landscape elements at that end. And just going to Kate's comment of the development of the schema at this point in time. And when we think about a lot of the very urban areas that we've all known and enjoyed, perhaps it's time to step back from pergolas everywhere and just do some fine hardscape and some mature spade-in trees and, you know, high finishes. If you don't have pets in the rental building, because then we need to have some turf for that as well. But I think, you know, a very, very urban solution would be applauded and within step with the rest of your scheme. So thank you kindly, and look forward to seeing the project come through development.
Great, thank you, Jill. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm probably going to echo a lot of things that have already been said. I think this is a wonderful project. I guess compared to the previous project, we're having probably about almost 50 more units added to this site. I support the variance. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I really like how the buildings are sited, and like what Kate mentioned, because of how they're situated, you're able to create these pockets for landscape areas. And I think that works really, really well. With form and character, I like the materials, the color choice. I like the use of the large fascias, and in some cases how the fascia is kind of carrying down to form the balconies. I think that works very, very well. And how it relates to the existing building next door. If I had, I only have really two corner problems with, not problems, but questions to ask. The south elevation of the rental building, the material palette on that is pretty bland. And if Glenn could comment on that, whether or not he considered adding any different textures to that, because it's going to be a highly visible area, even though it's on the south side of the building. So Glenn, if you can answer that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, that is that gable end does look into the internal courtyard of the Strata building and would be visible from Skinner Street. There has been some discussion that may also be a place where a public art component could maybe contribute there, because it does have a bit of a sight line from across the city. We know that. The articulation of our form is very much orientated towards the south end of that Chapel Street elevation, where you mentioned, the vertical elements forming the kind of the fins or the grills that terminate the building. So we didn't want to get to a point where we were watering down that strong architectural intention that was outward towards the plaza, but more of a silent element. But yes, it's one of those moments where there is a large expanse of solid. Perhaps we can certainly take that sort of consideration and see if there's ways that we might be able to kind of further articulate that piece, and whether or not it does end up being a place that would justify a public art component. We would maybe consider that.
Yeah, I think not only a public art component, but maybe lighter colors too, because it might help to brighten up the courtyard a bit more, because it looks like you have, at least in what I was looking at, more darker grays and whatnot. So even some lighter colors in there, something natural, brighter, might help to just enhance that courtyard. The only other thing is I'll just mention, like what Kate and Jill mentioned about the corner. Yeah, that corner, most of the traffic is going to come up from that direction, from Front Street, and I think you can really put a wow factor in that, not only with the landscape component, but even look at the form and character of that corner. When I first envisioned what somebody might be able to design for that site, I envisioned somebody that would design a prow, like a sharp, acute angle on the building to relate to the corner, something nautical. But I don't mind what you've done, because you did narrow it down as you come into the corner. But when you're looking at that corner with respect to the landscape concept, I think you should probably look at the form and character too. I like how you layered the fascias there. I think it looks really cool. But I think you might be able to do a little bit more with those balconies that come out, or something to give it a little bit more of a wow factor. Did you look at other options for that corner, Glenn?
Yeah, we've the articulation of the rental building was hinged. Basically, the whole thing kind of evolved out of its adjacency to the park. So the scale of that, not only did it kind of narrow in as we went forward into the park, but we kind of brought the roof plane down a whole story. And then we kind of launched a secondary roof plane over the top of those balconies. So it's interesting that you referred to the nautical thing. It's making a building be a ship is an expensive venture, but abstractly creating the gills and the vertical elements that break up the materiality and set the sort of the 4-story, 5-story, 6-story element was our way of creating a sort of a planar roof architecture that would sort of hover over the top of our cascading vertical material. So, that was the sort of riding ambition that we wanted to try and create, and so I think with the additional balconies kind of accentuating that reach out into the park space, it was, and then we have to be conscious of the sort of the practicality and the physicality of creating those decks and cantilevering those decks to a point where we may be introducing superfluous structure in order to create something. So I understand what you're saying, and we did wrestle with it, and ultimately I think I like the fact that the whole end of the building, as it clips into the larger mass, feels like its own pavilion type thing, and I think that was the approach that we wanted to try and rationalize for you, and then that's kind of where we landed, and then we massaged it into what you see today. So we also really like the fact that all of the amenity space is on that lower floor, and so not only can we get all of the animation of residents having guests and family and a party happening there, and then also the gym space being down there, and that kind of stuff. The ambition is that whole corner would be an animator for that public park, and to further that, that constant sort of turnaround of people utilizing that space would be that sort of eyes into the park, and maybe promote the occupation of the park throughout the day, or into the night, and maybe detract from people kind of misusing the space. So that's what we tried to achieve on the ground level, and then hovered this sort of pavilion clip on at the end at a scale that we think works well with the sort of the tightness of that park at the north end.
So I don't disagree, but I do agree with what Kate and Jill mentioned about the landscape concept and provide a little bit more wow factor. And I think there is the opportunity to provide a little bit more of a wow factor within the form and character of the building to make it really punch out on that corner. I don't dislike what you did, but I think you could probably do a little bit more there if everybody else agrees. I really like the landscape concept, like what I mentioned with the siting of the buildings. I think you did very well, Scott, with the creating the pockets and everything, and what you've done with it. I liked that you didn't overcook the courtyard. I like the artificial turf because I'm not sure how well grass is going to be able to maintained in that area, and especially the emphasis and effort through the site. I think you did very well. I like how you terraced the rain gardens down on the Skinner Street side, and it's just that north corner where I really need to make sure that is like a real focal point when you drive in. So yeah, and I really like this is probably for Greg, that over half the units are rental units. I think that's going to be highly desired downtown, and as the downtown area continues to improve, I think rental units are very important. And so yeah, overall, great job, you guys. I think you did a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Tony.
Thank you. Great project. I just wanted to support the variance like my colleagues. And there've been a lot of really positive things said about this project, and I'm not going to repeat any of them. I'll just say that I agree with every positive comment that's been made so far. I would just like to focus on two things. The small one being the bit I like best about this whole project is the streetscape along Skinner with the terracing rain gardens and that. I think that's going to be one of the most successful sort of streetscape pedestrian experiences that you could do. And I wish you could do that all sides of the building. But that being said, I realize it's not possible. At the urban scale, that is at the city level, that's a really good street wall that you've created with the buildings. Really nice definition and edge to the whole project and contribution to the street. And I think it's only accented and enhanced by the terracing rain gardens. So I think that's really well done. The point that I would like to pick up on was the one raised by Kevin. As soon as I saw this project and knowing the site a little bit as I do, obviously all of the world's greatest Flatiron buildings come to mind, particularly for us architects. And you can think of all of them all over the place, from Vancouver to Victoria and New York, of course, and elsewhere. And I realize you can't do that here because you don't want to pull it right up to the the corner of the building. It makes for unworkable interior spaces, among other things, which in the older buildings is part of their charm. But here it's we got realities to deal with. So I really like the fact that you've given over that whole pointy corner, as it were, to public landscaped amenity space. I think that's brilliant. That being said, I would go back to the discussion between Kevin and you, Glenn, sort of the back and forth on the end of your building. I really think that it definitely needs some strengthening. I think there's, in my opinion, a bit of a lost opportunity here to do something a little more dramatic, a little more of an accent. Maybe it doesn't need to cost any more than what you've been doing, just some rearrangement of the massing or something. I don't know. It could be simple, could be just balconies and a little bit of a more imaginative treatment there. I think this is a unique site in Nanaimo and a lot of other cities, and because of its pointy shape, no question. And I think that really the building could do a lot more than you have done. So that would be my only comment there. Otherwise, I think everything is excellent. I totally support this project. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tony. And Tyler.
Thanks, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation and the project. It was a good excuse to grab some Mexican food last night as well and take a walk around the site. I think, I'm really happy to see this project on numerous levels, and I actually very much like it than the taller tower that was the taller building that was proposed through the rezoning process. So overall, I think it's super positive. And I too share very similar feelings with AstroTurf, but if we could sort of stop the live stream here, I don't want this to be public record, but I actually think it kind of makes sense for the proposed use. So it pains me to say that, but I didn't have the same sort of reaction as I usually do to AstroTurf. The one question that I have, and I guess I'm going to put it as a question because it stood out to me when I got the agenda package, and it definitely stood out to me again in the presentation, is I'm just curious about the angle of the rental building. It runs parallel to Skinner, and it stood out for me. I don't have the sort of the language to articulate why it did, but I'm curious as to why to run parallel to Skinner and have the building face parallel to Skinner rather than Chapel. To me, Chapel is that streetscape, and it just sort of stood out to me, and so I was just kind of curious about that decision. I'm trying to understand it a bit better.
Yeah, Tyler, it's a good question. The ambition was, given the fact that the grade fall off, the grade section through that portion of Skinner Street up to the grade level that we were trying to achieve so that we could maintain a street frontage along Chapel Street, started to drive the orientation of the building in a manner that would provide as much accessible amenity as we possibly could on the Chapel Street side, because it was just simply the grade was just kept lending itself to creating that terraced landscape space that was on Chapel Street. And so as we further kind of cranked the building around to align with Skinner Street, we were further opening up the sort of the adjacency along the sidewalk of Chapel, and then we kind of got to the point where it felt that by perching the building on the escarpment where it is, we were able to kind of really pay attention to what was happening on Chapel Street and reserve the tightness of that steep slope to the kind of terrace landscaping and the rainwater gardens, which we've been able to kind of incorporate and capture as just an entirely different experience as you would navigate around the site. It sort of felt Chapel's connection to the top of Commercial Street and that sort of natural flow of the commercial coming along there, and then also the adjacency to the law courts, kind of just sort of everything was priming us to kind of create as much public space along that end. And to be honest, it's after a fairly relentless street wall along Chapel Street with Studio NA and then 91 Chapel Street and then this one, it's that last little moment where you get to break free and create an object which really kind of defines the end of the street or terminates the street with an accumulation of built form and public spaces around it. So we did wrestle with it a number of times. The rationale behind our 91 Chapel Street and even the Strata building here is that very same reason. There's a natural efficiency to lots with a particular depth and width, and these lots just don't lend themselves to that kind of efficiency. So it's how do we best create the edges and the spaces in between that we can offer as a shared outdoor amenity space, be it public in the form of the park space in the plaza, or private in the form of a light well internal European style courtyard for the Strata building. So that was the main driver for doing that. We actually had to peel away our double loaded corridor into a single loaded corridor so we could kind of notch as far up into the corner as we could. So those were some of the significant drivers on that one.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for just I was curious, and so just it was a point of curiosity, and I appreciate taking the time to walk through that. Other than that, the north corner, I don't know what the answer is, and I think there were some good comments there, but I do think some just attention there. I would support a recommendation if there was one around just taking a look at that north corner, whether it's the landscaping, whether it's the building. Other than that, great project, and of course support the variance. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tyler. And Angela.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everybody, for your presentation. Like the project. Love how you guys have incorporated the design to suit the existing buildings. I just had a couple of things, and just to build on one of my items that it relates to Tyler's comment. I did question, why didn't you continue the commercial down all the way down Chapel? And then just looking at it further, it makes sense, or it's a nice opening to incorporate some garden space and then open up right into the courtyard as well. I think it will be a nice amenity there to finish off sort of the puzzle piece on Chapel Street. But I did wonder and think that maybe there should be some commercial spaces along that entry level, the first level in that space. You know what I mean? There's some residentials along the floor in the rental building, and maybe that could be commercial spaces to match up with the rest of Chapel Street to continue on that pedestrian experience with amenity and commercial business. I just can see like a little coffee shop in there, and it's a nice little courtyard area where people could sit and connect with a couple of small businesses within that space. And secondly, was of course the anchor point at the corner of Skinner and Chapel. Really feel that should be more of a landmark form and character there. You picture coming off Commercial and up Chapel, and it really is a view corridor it really is an important view corridor in Nanaimo, and that building is right there. It's a real sort of piece that could be stronger. And I'm not really sure that balconies along there is a good connection with people driving up Chapel Street, and you got the headlights coming up and you're sort of head to head with people on the balcony, and it just feels like it's not a nice maybe connection flowing, kind of staring up at each other. So it would be, like everybody's mentioned, nicer to see something reconsidered along that anchor point. And finally, the roof amenity is it's great that you've offered a roof amenity for the strata and also the rental. I do think it could be enhanced with some green roof features. So that's what I have to say about that. And I do support the variance. I do think it makes sense to continue on that zero lot line adjustment there. So great job. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to start by saying that I was absolutely relieved when I looked at this project, because when I saw the address, I thought we'd be dealing with a 24-story building. And I was appalled at the first time that came around. I know, I think it might even be through the same company. It was a beautiful building, but I just really felt it intruded on the whole neighborhood context. And I think what you've presented us here is a really good solution to adding density in this area without going up and sort of having an intrusive building in the area. You've tried to fit in. I walk in this area a lot, and it can do a lot. I think what you're going to do is really enhance the streetscape, excuse me, on both of those streets. Skinner is kind of right now, kind of back lane entry into parking lots, and excuse me, most unpleasant. So I think, again, your project is just really adding some really, really lovely features. And I also appreciate the fact that along Chapel Street, you've broken up the two buildings. Again, walking up there, there tends to be wind tunnels that form in that direction, because we often, summertime, we get a lot of wind coming from the north, kind of channels down there. So I think having the breaks in the building also will help that. And having a little sort of rest and reprieve at the garden spots along the way, the public spaces. These are really, really good. So I really don't have. I think the building, all of that is really working. There's really nice features to it. Again, though, I concur with my colleagues on the north end. I know the one-way street, the streets, people are going to be coming around that corner, and always sort of splitting at that corner. So that little park in the corner of the building are going to be major features, and the first thing people are going to see as they enter that area. And so it would be nice to sort of just revisit that as well. And the other aspect I like is that you're making two spaces for public art, but I think those can also work with in the park area. I would really like to see you work with the city and the cultural department, even to the point of sort of talking to them when you're just in the planning stages here, in terms of what you put in that park. In part because I think we've got to look beyond public art being a sculpture or a blob in the plaza, as we often said about some of the stuff that came out in the 80s. I think public art can be interesting. It could be partly seating that's artwork. It can be a number of different things. Like I always look at, one of the things I liked about Nanaimo Harbor was the sort of massed feature on our Pioneer Plaza looking over the harbor, for example. There's little things you can do that actually become both architectural art and so on. So I think there needs to be a really good dialogue that happens between your team and the city cultural people, and maybe work on that together. And the same goes for the wall art. I think you've got a great wall feature there to put something on. And again, I think the city now has worked on getting a good team of people together who they can consult on art projects and work with. So you're really in a good form to sort of do something really unique in that area. And with the little, the little restaurant across the street, you're talking about your amenity area and people sort of spilling out into that park. In the summertime, Gina usually puts a little outdoor seating area out in their parking lot. So I could see might be a little party central there, but anyway, so I do appreciate that. And then one last comment on the artificial turf. I'll let you know that little church across the street, across Chapel Street, actually has artificial turf. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but I have. So you won't be the only one in the neighborhood if you use it. So anyway, great work, and thank you for your presentation. So I just want to go back to the panel members then, and maybe we can summarize if there's some recommendations that we'd like to add to this. I'm not hearing any objection to the variance, so I think we can probably consider that as we'll recommend that. But I'm hearing a couple things here. First of all, of course, the north end of this building. I'm wondering if we want to make a recommendation in terms of consider ways to enhance the form and character of the north corner of the rental building in order to, I'm not sure how you want to phrase this, if anybody wants to pitch in here.
I'll jump.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
We could either form it into one recommendation, which would be to enhance the north elevation through landscape component and form and character, or we can put them up into two different recommendations. We don't need to be specific. I think the applicant knows our concerns about it. We can keep it as simple as that, or we can break it down into different ones.
Okay, so enhance the north elevation in terms of landscape and the form and character of the north end of the building, of the rental building.
If anybody has a better recommendation, please jump in.
Marie?
Yeah.
I'd like to maybe add the point of a hierarchy in the landscape solution.
And how would you phrase that?
Just as that.
Consider
a clear hierarchy within an urban landscape solution. Because as you've mentioned, I don't know if this is overstepping or not, but to see a blob in a plaza would just be a darn shame.
Yeah, I'm thinking also of adding a one that we ensure that they work with the culture
highly integrated, but public art and the landscape. If there's a hierarchy determined as opposed to just setting elements in.
What do you mean by hierarchy? Because I don't think I'm understanding.
Well, right now, when I look at that particular rendering, I see this wonderful relief on a building in the background, and I see trees in the middle ground, and then I see a pergola and then I see a sculpture, a vertical sculpture, and everything reads as nothing has priority. So in order to have a very clear vision of what that is going to be, there has to be a hierarchy.
Yeah, I don't know if we can really dictate that. I think Kevin's suggestion of considering ways to enhance the form and character of the north corner. Well, where did I put it here? Enhance the north elevation in terms of landscape, form, and character of the north end of the building. And then if we combine that as well with consultation with the city cultural department, I don't know that adding hierarchy in there is going to really make a difference. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. Kate?
Yeah, I just wondered, Jill, if we said to make it a more prominent space, would that then suggest that there should be a hierarchy? No? Okay.
Yeah, normally we don't sort of recommend.
If you use the term landscape hierarchy in the north, you'd probably be fine, but just go with it, whatever works.
Enhance the north elevation in terms of landscape hierarchy and the form and character of the north end of the building. Okay.
That works for me.
Okay. And then the parks, that's sort of encompassing the park space. That one recommendation then does both of for the North End Park. And other than I would like to see a recommendation that the team work with the city, even though that is I think it's part of the requirement, as Caleb might have had indicated, but work closely with the city cultural department in developing an art plan for the property. Does that sound? Do other people agree with that?
I'm just wondering if it's already there and it's already a process. Why do we have to add it in? Just curiosity.
I guess just to make sure we, as a group, we're in support of that.
Okay, I just think that's sort of outside the scope of our mandate, but
it works into form and character, I think. Anybody else? Am I the only one?
No, I don't disagree.
No, I don't mind. Just it's on the record.
Yeah, it's just to record it that we've considered, we're concerned about it.
If it's required, why do we have to say it? I mean, we might as well just say that they work with the engineering department on the street edges and stuff like that. So yeah. I take Tyler's point, and I mean, we could say it if we want, but I don't really think it adds anything of substance.
I would disagree. This is Kate. Sorry, but I would suggest a lot of our recommendations are actually things that are required that are not included. Isn't that true?
I think it's a very slippery slope to start providing commentary that is divorced. It is not about the design as it relates to the design guidelines, and is more about city process. I just think it's slippery slope outside the scope of even comments around the street plan, around parking and things like that. I just think we're entering into areas that's not in the mandate of the panel. But
could we make a comment then that we recommend that the artwork be integrated with the the design of the landscape and or building be
I think that was my point, Kate, that I wanted to get across is that they work at that level, not just, somebody, they work with the city and have a sculpture picked out. It's to work in, especially with that North Park, that the public art element will be working with the landscape design. Yeah, Tony?
Not to belabor the point, but I think that this does raise a good point. We're looking for a stronger end to that building. We're looking for a stronger park, whether it's hierarchy or some other terminology, I don't know. And we're looking for an integrated sculpture. So the three of them, somehow we have to say that they just be strongly integrated to make a maximum contribution to the streetscape at that corner of the site, something along that line. I think that's what we're trying to say. Maybe that's what I'm hearing anyway. But.
Well, we could add that to our enhance the north elevation in terms of landscape hierarchy, public art and form and character of the north end of the rental building.
And I hear the point that, we shouldn't say we don't need the additional tagline of working with the city because,
goes without saying. Okay. So maybe
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that I'm part of the development team, Chris from Westmark Construction, and we've been active in the community for 30 years now. We have a combination of a product for sale and a product for rent that we'll keep in our portfolio. So it's not easy to convey the exact form and character and planting that the end result will look like. But we can assure you that we take pride in what we're doing here, and we do want to deliver the right result. I've listened to everyone's comments, and I do agree with you in principle on the top end of the building and the plaza. So everything you've said makes great sense, and we're definitely going to enhance that, work on it, and I think that we'll be successful in delivering the result that you're trying to suggest here. So, and it'll come back through staff in our revisions.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll maybe just make it one recommendation to enhance the north elevation in terms of landscape hierarchy, public art, and form and character of the north end of the rental building. And the group has received our comments, so we can leave it at that, I think. And there was also some discussion about the parking garage entrance from Skinner Street. Somebody want to propose it? Did you want a recommendation on that area? There's a couple comments about that, the entryway into there, the adding some vines along that wall.
Yep. I don't know if anyone else agrees or not.
A couple people commented on that part of it. I think.
Yeah, I think that they should look at ways to soften that wall, maybe with whether they use green walls with vines or something else.
So consider ways to soften the concrete wall on Skinner Street, on the Skinner Street elevation.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
And Angela had a suggestion of considering commercial space on the ground floor of the rental building. I believe that's what you're trying to say, Angela?
Yeah, I wasn't, I'm not sure how it's possible to integrate that, or if it makes sense, if the staff discussed that option with the applicants already. But I thought it would be something that could be considered if it hasn't already. And I know I was one of the last people to speak, so maybe the design panel could just make their yays or nays against.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I thought, Angela, that idea is a great idea. Whether it's right now it's a meeting space on the corner, meeting room or whatever. And I think maybe it might have to be made a little bit bigger to be a coffee shop or something. But I think if you combine that with enhancing the corner with softscapes and landscape, hardscapes, I think there's a fantastic opportunity to do something really fantastic on that corner. And I think it all really, once you have something there and it's made more public accessible, I think the opportunity is there to do something really neat on that corner. And I think a coffee shop with that many 154 units there, I think a coffee shop, as an example, would be a great idea. So I fully support that one.
Kate?
I wondered if it might be helpful. Can we ask the applicant? There's one image on what page? Oh,
yeah, you're next, Jill.
Yeah, I was given the close proximity of the first building and that it does have commercial space at the ground floor, correct? Along Chapel Street, that first building. Is that right? So
the ground floor along Chapel Street are residential units. It's exactly the same as.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The other building.
The rental building.
Not the rental. Oh, so both buildings, it's residential.
No. Yeah, both buildings are residential. In the same way that. The ground floor of the Strata building on Chapel Street, they are residential unit types with the room facing out onto Chapel Street is a flex room, which in the same way that 91 Chapel Street was developed, it is an opportunity for someone to have a home-based business there. And as you can see, people have gravitated to that, but their sleeping unit, it's kind of like it's then becomes a studio suite where the sleeping unit is in the middle and the living area opens up into the private courtyard.
Okay. Okay.
So with the rental building being a double loaded corridor, we have an apartment style unit on that ground floor. So making that frontage commercial would be reducing the number of residential units in there, and then would be introducing leased space within the rental building. There's also a physical disconnect between the south half of the ground floor of the rental building with the plaza level as well. So anyway, those are just some of the considerations that would impact.
Okay, thank you very much. All I was going to say is I don't feel like we have a lack of commercial space, and the adjacent new building, there's another building that's on the other front street that has commercial space at the ground and that is still trying to be successful. So that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Jill?
I would like to weigh in here. I really don't think we should be weighing in on the developer's pro forma. It is obvious that they have thought through, if one knows those units at 91 Chapel, they're really brilliant, the way they've been configured and the flexibility in them. It seems to me that the program is good and solid the way things are, and for us to think about suggesting that they move to commercial has a whole plethora of issues beyond just saying, oh, we're going to animate the street. Leave that to the developer. That's my 2 cents.
Chris?
I appreciate your comments, and it is not part of our development plan to create any commercial space in the at the prow end of the property, if we want to refer to it as that. But what I can tell you is that early on, we discussed with Lania and Lisa that it's our intent to provide services within the courtyard that will allow a licensed kiosk vendor to set up. So if you've ever seen those very small cappuccino kiosk vendors, we want to try and introduce that certainly into the north or the top end of the building, and possibly during good weather months in the plaza as well. So we're trying to integrate that to bring a little more vibrancy and food vending opportunities or drink vending opportunities to the entire project.
I appreciate that clarification, Chris. Okay, so do we have a consensus here on adding or not? It sounds like we've got mixed reviews on this, and I'm sort of on the side myself of not suggesting the commercial space. I think I take Jill's point that I think we've got to leave that up to the developers here in this case. Anybody else want to support this recommendation about commercial space? Doesn't look like it. Okay. And Angela, you also mentioned something about the roof space, adding, I wasn't sure, I can't remember what it was. Something on the roof decks?
Yeah, I just thought it would probably be ideal if they could integrate some green roofs materials and features if it's feasible.
Yeah, we didn't ask that as a question, so I'm wondering if Glenn wants to respond to that. Perhaps we don't need to even do that as a recommendation. Yep. Yeah.
I actually just to touch on that, we do have rooftop amenity for the Strata building, articulated in very similarly to what we did at 91 Chapel with patio space, covered entryways and stuff. The intent, I was just speaking with Greg the other day as we were prepping for this, and they actually want to push and enhance the rooftop amenity on the rental building as far as they possibly can in order to really create a space that's going to be vibrant for people that live there. So the introduction of the potential for being able to have eating areas up there with open barbecue opportunities, seating, the green roof element would probably come in the format of decently sized planting boxes that were not necessarily integrated into the roof system, because we get into other issues with green roofs and liability within residential buildings. I'm sorry, just insurance, period. But I know that we are going to be pushing the amenity on the rooftop for the rental building for sure. So I can pretty much guarantee that you'll see a sort of a modification of that as we push the project forward into building permit process and on through the remainder of the DP process. So it's definitely a key point for Primex, and Chris can second this if he needs to, but it's becoming more and more important that the amenities in rental buildings are not just dark holes in the corner that are afterthoughts. It's rental is becoming a significant lifestyle choice for people, and as such, the choices and amenities that go along with your rental unit are key to the success of that building. So, yeah, that's the hope that sort of satisfies the curiosity.
Well, thanks for clarifying that, Glenn. Angela, is that okay then?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think what I've come up with here then are two recommendations.
There's one more.
Oh, sorry, was there? Okay.
Also mentioned about enhancing the south elevation of the rental building. I think that's probably the most important interior wall that faces into the site. And Glenn and I did discuss the use of maybe possibly lighter colors or ways of using public art, like even a very minimalist mural or something just something faint, something to enhance that wall. But all I would say is I would just recommend that the south elevation on the rental building be enhanced.
Okay. So consider enhancing the south elevation of the rental building. Okay. So 3 recommendations. Any others that I missed? Oh, okay. So can I have somebody make a motion then to accept the proposal as presented with these 3 recommendations and an approval of the variance? Kevin, are you motioning?
Yes, I'd make a recommendation to accept the application as presented with those 3 recommendations and support for the variance.
And a seconder? Tony? All in favor? Okay, it's passed. So thank you very much, guys. That was really appreciated, your presentation. It's great.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's time.
Okay. I'm thinking now we should probably take our 5-minute break. And nice to see you, Charles. The silent partner.
Not so silent.
Not so silent. Okay, maybe we can, where's Caleb? Perhaps we could take a 5-minute break here. And how do we do that? Should everybody? Okay, live streaming has been resumed. All right, so we're back on air. All right, so we have a second proposal this evening, and this one is on Boxwood Road. And we have Sadie Robinson, planner of the city, who's going to introduce this one. You can go ahead, Sadie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item on the agenda this evening is DP 1255. It's a development permit application for the property at 2229 Boxwood Road. The total property area is 1.2 hectares. The applicant has submitted to the city a subdivision application to create a parcel 1.2 hectares in size in the southern portion of the property. The development permit application is to consider a proposed townhouse development on the new 1.2 hectare parcel. The applicant is proposing 31 townhouse units in single, duplex, and triplex building forms. The property is zoned R6 low density residential and is within development permit area 9 for multifamily development. The general development permit area guidelines apply to the proposed development. Variances are proposed for building height from 9 meters to 9.75 meters, and for the height of a retaining wall with fence from 2.4 meters to 4.2 meters. The retaining wall is proposed to be 2.4 meters at its highest point, and the fence is proposed to be 1.8 meters. The applicant may now begin their presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, guys. Thank you to everybody for taking the time. And we're going to switch gears a little bit from the last presentation from downtown density to R6. With me tonight are Will from Victoria Design, Nick from Nickbury Architecture, and Danica from Kyland Design, doing our landscape work. I'll start us off by doing a bit of a site context, project background, general discussion, and then I'll pass it over to Will to talk about the building form and density and specifics about the buildings. And then Danica can finish off with our landscape, and then we'll try to address any questions. I will start with a context plan. Does that come through, everybody?
Yep, it's there. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So as a group, we're very happy to be here tonight to present actual buildings on a very challenging brownfield development site. We have been working through this site on behalf of Pacific Gold Homes for about 6 years, trying to get to this point. And so it's exciting to be able to present kind of the vision that we had when they purchased this property and finally bring it to a point where we can see some built form. The site is fairly centrally located between Northfield and Bowen Road, close to Bebin, Koltai, and other commercial amenities. The background of the site is a bit unique. It has a mine shaft on it. It has an air shaft for that mine. It has an old lake bed that's been filled in over the years with both coal waste and construction debris over the last sort of 70 years. And so the project is part of a 5-lot subdivision of that property. And the intent of Pacific Gold Homes is to build on their recent success on the 27 houses they built just south of the property and carry that same quality through into the new site. One of the major features of this site is as Pacific Gold Homes transcends from the brownfield history, is there's a 1.2 hectare private forest being built just across the street. This is lot 1 down in this corner here. Mountain Vista extends through. And there's a 1.2 hectare private forest being built in here to create a very significant green space for the subdivision. Hence the name Arbor Park, and it'll sort of feed off of that when you look at the green space on the other side of lot 1 when Danica walks us through that. Flowing back to the overall site context, the site is bordered mostly by single-family homes on the north and the south, with a little bit of multifamily on the Ridgemount area up at the top. So the design is really intended to carry that transition from single family, and there's a couple of separated duplex on the corner, and carry that density into an R6 zone. As we worked through that site, mobility was a fairly key piece of the puzzle. Being situated where it is, there's this new Boxwood connector that'll push through later this year. That public use trail we talked about early on that south end of the park and private forest ties into a very strong multi-use path that runs up and down Mountain Vista for future connection up to the north end of the Nanaimo. So as we developed Lot 1, we worked closely with city staff to make sure that we were creating strong pedestrian connections from Mountain Vista up at the top side through to the subdivision and out to that multi-use trail. It's actually why we have that to request in for the variance on the retaining wall. This, we'll get to it when we get to the specifics on the building, but this walkway has to go from a high elevation up here down to a lower elevation here. So the only reason for that retaining wall is the existing parking lot at Ridgemont and that pedestrian connection through to our site. So when we get to that building form, you'll see that on the elevations. Important for the owner on this one was, based on their sales experience at Boxwood, was to create an increased number of family-oriented units. So all of these units are 3-bedroom units. They're all of a size that we believe would be reasonable for a family to live in, and created that sort of amenity space with that in mind. I think at that point, I will pass it over to Will to talk a little bit about the specifics of the site and the buildings and the finishes that they've chosen.
Thank you, Darren. My name is Will Peerboom. I'm with Victoria Design Group, working with Nick Bray Architecture he'll be the CRP on this project due to the number of consultants that will be involved. As was said before, we are proposing a 31 unit townhome development. This unit will comprise of single unit blocks and up to blocks of 3 units. Our FAR is just under the max of 0.45, and the proposed site coverage on this lot is about 23.5%, well under the maximum 40% allowable. This will give us some additional areas of green space that we can use as community areas. Units vary from 2 to 3 story composition with private patios and yards. Floor plans are designed to capture natural light and spatial planning appropriate for family lifestyle. Blocks 1 and 4 have been strategically designed to be front Mount Vista Drive, building animation between the public road and private parking areas that will be accessed through an internal driveway. Grade extremes force blocks 8 to 11 to be slightly over height based on the calculation methodologies done in Nanaimo, resulting in the need for a minor variance in height. Working with these steep grades allows for fluid stepping that will conceive some visual interest and playfulness to the project itself. We're requesting a height variance of 0.75 meters as a maximum on some of the units, but a lot of them are a lot less to accommodate the existing site grades and building form. A key feature in this community is the relativity to the residential development to the south and the future development to the north. And as was mentioned, we are integrating a meandering footpath that invites locals to use, building on the village feel and belonging. Path and communal gathering spaces are encouraged in this project. Right where it says Lot 101, and I'll let the landscape architect expand on that. We are creating a private or a public for the project itself gathering space. We're providing 31 parking stalls in garages on the units, plus 31 driveway parking stalls. So there will be 62 stalls for all the townhouses, plus an additional 10 guest parking stalls, as you can see in the internal driveway area. The garages are large enough to contain 2 bicycle stalls, with the addition of 8 bicycle stalls and bike racks, again, just on either side of lot of where it says Lot 1. We can move to the exteriors renderings. We go to so the exterior of the building is West Coast inspired exterior, will comprise of composite shingles and lap siding. The composite shingles will be actually basket weaved as terminology in the trade at the corners, to give it a more realistic look to it. And all the trim around the windows and corner trim where there is siding will be a minimum of a 1x6 trim, sort of, and again enhance the trim of the building itself. The exterior will also feature decorative blocking and knee braces, and also exposed rafters on key features of the exterior, like the porches. And I think also the rendering up the single-family dwelling will show that off quite prominently. The first single-family dwelling, that will be kind of a transition unit from the single-family neighborhood to the south. And we've wrapped the porch around, again, to kind of break up that facade as you're coming along Mountain Vista Drive and into our proposal, our project. Other than that, I'll turn that over to the landscape designer to talk about the landscaping. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Danica. I'm with Khaled Services. And can everyone hear me okay? I have a little bit of a problem with my laptop. Okay? So the intent really of my landscape design here is to provide private spaces to make more of a single family feel to the backyards, while also focusing on providing an internal streetscape with some uniformity to really distinguish it from the thoroughfare along Mountain Vista. The units fronting Mountain Vista will have hedges and will also incorporate some stone pillars with black powder coated metal picket style fence. Inside, where the letter N is, sorry, it's very hard to see, where the internal roads meet, that's where we're going to have an open green space area with some seating for people to get together and gather outside of the private areas. It's a pretty straightforward design. I'm trying to allow for some storage in the side yards, because that is always a key issue for people moving into houses, and to try to also minimize the impact of that retaining wall with some screen planting where I can. And the plant list, it's really hard to see, sorry, on this screen, but just incorporating native plants where I can, drought tolerant, low maintenance shrubs, and to give people a sense of home really with some unique shrubs where I can, and what will be appropriate to Nanaimo, hopefully for years to come without too much climate change impacting it. But that is pretty much everything I have to say today on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the landscape.
Okay, and that's your presentation then?
I might just expand just a little bit, if I may, Marie, just on the retaining wall. So we do have these elevations that are probably tough to see on the screen, but you can see the retaining wall starts at 0 and then it works its way down as we drop down that hill, mostly because we're constrained by the existing parking lot of the Ridgemont at the other side. And so we've done our best to plant and create room for planting to soften that, but we're really constrained by this walkway here. And it's a requirement of our PLA that we do supply that connection at that point. So we've done our best to mitigate it, but we think it's a really important feature as well. And that is the end. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, so panel members, anybody have any questions for the city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll do our little rounds and see what people have to say. How about Kevin? Would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice presentation, Darren. I haven't seen you for a while. It's good to see you again. I support the variances. I think what you're doing with height and the retaining walls, when you're dealing with sloping sites, these things come up. So I fully support the variances. I like how you cited the buildings. There's really no issues there. Form and character. The only thing I like the way you, Will, how you captured and took into context the architectural styles of some of the buildings around the neighborhood and blended this into the project. I like how you've elevated and had the stairs coming up to some of the units on the low side, and I like how the roof slopes, the contrast between the fascia and the materials. I think you did really well with that, but I think the only concern I might have is ways to individualize the buildings and even the units. And I think there might be an opportunity there for you to look at either colors or textures or something to help make not only each building different, but also each unit different. And it could be done through door color, it could be done through different things. But I'm just curious, Will, if you looked at that as being a possible, not confusion, but you put door, I'm not sure where you're going to put your door units, the numbers on the door units, but did you give any thought to how you might be able to make each unit a little bit more individualized?
We could do that again, changing entrance doors and doing things like that. We definitely wanted to create more of a cohesive units by having them, not changing up all the materials on the buildings and trying to make them look as individual units, more of a cohesive project in itself. But I think we can maybe look at some elements, door colors and door elements, even garage door changes to sort of give some of the units some of individualization, as you would put it. And I think that could easily be incorporated.
Yeah, it's something that I find with buildings, if it gets a little bit too repetitive, it just kind of, if visitors are coming, as which house is their house, and if it's something like it's the red door or something, but I'm not going to.
I would prefer orange, as you can see behind me. That's my Dutch heritage. So
yeah, I'm not going to be specific. I'm just going to recommend that you look to individualize an entries to the unit. Other than that, I really like the form and character. I like the steeper roof slopes that you put on there. I think you did a really good job, and especially giving it a good residential feel. I think you did a great job with it. Annika, I think you did a great job with the landscape concept. I like that you have a very good tree and plant palette. And the only two things that I would say is it doesn't appear that there's a sidewalk on the interior connector to the buildings. Is that correct? I didn't see it on your plan.
I think if you go up to you can share the screen, Darren.
Yeah.
I think it shows up better on the architectural plan.
Or in your plan, the walkway comes through, and then there's a demarked walk pedestrian up to the north, and then to the south, it's a shared spot.
It's on the south side, is there?
No, the city connection that was prioritized by planning at the city was up to the north, and then we think this is also a very important piece, but we thought that would be more a combined complete street kind of concept.
Yeah, so there's no drive or pedestrian sidewalk through that drive aisle. Is that correct? It's only on the one that comes down off the top, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is it a 6 meter drive aisle?
The drive aisle, I think it's a full 6 meters across here, and then it's a little bit. I think there's still 6 meters here. Will, do you remember?
Yeah, no, it's 6 meters going to the north, and I believe
be 7.5 or so down.
It's 7.5 or 7.6 across the main road coming in off from the east.
From the east, right. And so is there room there to put a textural change in the drive aisle to allow for the appearance of a sidewalk, especially along the south, I guess it would be the south portion of that drive aisle?
We could definitely look into that. Along the south end, we have all the driveways coming out from the 3-story units. And we also have an issue where we have all the parking, the guest parking at the lower section. So we're trying to, I guess we could run the sidewalk on the backside of the parking stalls and then meandered up.
need to be a sidewalk. It just needs to maybe be a hardscape textural change, in my opinion. And because the road that goes through to the north, is that a sidewalk going there on the left side going up, or is that?
It's a textural change. It's not a full sidewalk. It's a textural change like you're describing.
Yeah. So I think if you use, and you have that crosswalk there, it's a good idea. And if there's a way that you can come back down to the south side in front of the driveways and do a textural change there, because a lot of pedestrians will be going in that direction at the curtains and whatnot. So I think that might be something for you to consider. Aside from that, the only other thing for Danica is you have two landscape areas on the east side of the property, one at the far east, and then one just in behind the visitor parking on the east side that are just pretty much lawn areas. And did you consider using or adding any sort of additional features to that to make it more of like a social amenity area?
Yeah, originally, with discussions with the developer, we just wanted to keep an open lawn area just so that it could be used for children and pets. I find a lot of times when we're doing like a specific, like a play structure, then you come sort of in a conflict because lots of people would like to use the open area and not everybody has the same user needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that the open lawns, they just lend itself more to, kids doing pickup soccer or people exercising their dogs and community picnics and whatever the neighborhood really likes to do.
Yeah. The other driving factor, Kevin, is that in the context plan, it's tough to see on the individual plans, but directly across that crosswalk is a 1.2 acre play area, basically. So it's a private forest and hills and that kind of thing. And so the developer has made quite a commitment to create that big green space. And part of that commitment was to allow other choking on my teeth, development lots to leverage that for kids playing, doing what kids do, and have there's trails to it and a walking path as well.
Okay, I accept that. I was just curious if you looked at any alternatives to that. So like what I mentioned earlier, just with form and character, I like the project, Darren, and with form and character, the only thing is ways to individualize the buildings and entryways. So
that's a good point.
Very good job. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And Angela, would you like to go?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Darren and Danica, and now I'm trying to.
Stop sharing the screen then, Darren.
Yep.
Thanks.
Nice to see you, Danica.
Nice to see you, Angela.
Yeah, I think this project is a wonderful infill project for families. There's a lot of families looking for properties, and this is going to be a nice use of, like, say, a brownfield site. And I really didn't have anything to add aside from what Kevin was mentioning, is just maybe some breaking up of the form and character between the buildings, individualization, or just mixing up some of the material. And that was really all I had to add. So I don't want to carry on, but really appreciate the project and your time on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela. Tony.
Thank you. Great project. I won't repeat too much, I hope. I think the design of the individual units and their groupings, the ones, the twos, the threes, are some of the best townhouse designs I've seen in a long time for that traditional West Coast look, and I really congratulate the design team on that. They're quite exquisite from a number of points of view: the detailing, the shape, the massing, the variety of the entrances, porches, and those kind of things. I think you just nailed it. That being said, I would pick up on Kevin's point about the needing some variety to the color scheme. and it doesn't have to be dramatic, red, white, blue, obviously, but something within a restrained palette that offers within an overall theme some variety, not just to individualize the units, but frankly to break up the monotony of some of those long rows, particularly that southern row. It's gonna look quite deadly if everything is exactly the same color. And whether you do that with a certain amount of the massing or wall colors, the garage doors and the front doors are obvious candidates, but I really think the building walls need some variety. And I'm only talking like, maybe 10% of the units or something like that, not a wholesale, redo. But I really think it needs something just to take the edge off that repetitive, monolithic kind of a look. Otherwise, I think it's a tremendous project. Support the variances, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Kate, would you like to go?
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for the presentation. I agree with what has been said by my fellow design panel members. I would like to say, though, you have an opportunity to have a lot more trees on this site, especially taking advantage of what a tree can do to shade the hard surfaces. So along your edge on that the street, what's Mount Vista? Yes, thank you. I would love to see a few more trees, making that edge a little bit more robust, especially. Will Mount Vista, actually I have a question, Darren. Yeah. Boxwood currently connects, but will it eventually not connect? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a temporary connection to the existing subdivision that comes out when the Boxwood connector goes in.
Okay, yeah. So, but yes, anyway, I could just see a lot more trees on the site, and I think the residents who will live here will appreciate them, and so will the birds and bugs and bees. And when we have a heat wave, it will be greatly appreciated. So, I'm familiar with the park, which is a great amenity that's going to be included in this whole development, and maybe some of that character can kind of creep into this development in bringing in more trees and more plants. If you can creep in a few more plants, I see a lot of lawn. I would love to see a little bit more expanding of the plants, especially along the street. Mount Vista, it feels less attention has been given to that. I realize it's sort of not a connector street and it kind of comes in, but I still think your project, you're taking off a lot of boxes, and you could take off more with a few more trees.
And I'll offer one quick apology. The rendering predates some of Danica's adjustments on that. So there is quite a strong hedge row and kind of a transition from a natural forest to a planted living space. But the renderings don't do a good job of reflecting what's on Danica's drawing. So point well taken.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Tyler.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to the proponents and the design team here. I don't have anything to add other than what's been said. Just would echo Kevin and Tony's comments around. I think the units are very attractive, but if there is some features that could be added just to provide a little bit of uniqueness here and there, I think that would go a long way. And I would echo Kate's comments. If there does look like there is more opportunity for some planting, I don't think it has to be a lot of a really intense landscaping scheme, but trees and where they can be provided are always a good thing. So thanks so much, and thanks for everyone for being here.
Thanks, Tyler.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. No need to pile on about the variation. Exactly what I was going to say. I also agree with Kate that I think there's more opportunities for trees. It looks like the rhythm that was being set up along the southern road gets lost as you turn up towards the north. So I think there's some opportunities there. And then the only thing else I would add, I saw there was a comment from staff to consider relocating some of the visitor parking stalls. I think the comment was based around aesthetics. I would actually suggest that as well, but also just to provide more equitable access to those stalls from the units to the north. So if there's a way to redistribute that, I think that would be a good addition. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. And Jill.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. And it's a lovely project. Appreciate the commitment by the developer with the green space. The thing that jumped out at me was not necessarily the volume of additional trees, but my ask and of consideration was going to be around the sizing of trees. When we look at the rendering of the units, which are quite successful in themselves, the notion of the building height and installation and the small trees that are staked is just a little disappointing. So if there is an opportunity to upsize those trees to the degree that you can upon installation, I was leaning more toward the interior roads emphasis there. I think that might be complementary to getting the show on the road, getting the project on the road out of the gate. So thank you kindly for a great presentation and a great product. Great reuse for Brownfield.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jill. So yeah, okay. I have to agree with everything there. I'm just really happy to see a project like this that looks very appealing for family homes. It's got lots of green space around the individual units, providing lots of space for kids, and really love the fact that there's a natural park right nearby. Just the kind of, I think a great kind of neighborhood to add to Nanaimo. So I can't really add anything here. I agree with the other recommendations that were made through the discussions. So I think I'll just begin by summarizing. We can have a summary of the different recommendations that came out of this. I didn't hear any objections to the variances. Did anybody have one? No? Okay. And I'm hearing a couple recommendations. Consider ways to individualize the buildings and or entries to the different units. I don't know if we need to specify through color or anything, just leave it at that. And consider a marked pedestrian path along the south drive aisle, I think. That's correct, Kevin? Yeah, okay. And consider ways to add more trees and plants throughout the site. Just leave it at that as well. I think we've heard our suggestions and probably work with it from there. Now, is there anything I missed?
This is Kate Murray. I was just actually did a very quick, just reviewed again the trees, and maybe to Jill's point, I think Jill was talking about the caliper of the tree, but I could see that you have the space for actually bigger growing trees than what you're specifying. And maybe that might be a nice thing, is picking larger growing trees, because you have those big lawn spaces, especially where you have more open space. And a note that will come up when Walter from the city talks to you, it will probably be recommended you don't plant cedar. So I'm just bringing that up.
Would you like me to add that into the consider ways to add more trees, especially larger growing trees and plants throughout the site?
Yes, yeah, I think so. They have the space, so why not?
Yeah, well, I think your point about the shade is a good one.
Yeah, I would just jump in on Jason's comment. There's a lot of visitor parking on the south end of the property, and if there's ways to possibly, convert some of those to landscaped areas, and maybe look at ways to increase or at least add some visitor parking to the north end of the property. I think that was a good comment, and anybody else wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that one, because I did miss it. So how do we want to phrase that? Consider adding more, I think Jason said it.
Yeah, redistributing.
Redistributing that.
Yeah.
Consider redistributing the visitor parking.
Yeah, we actually have a nice little space between blocks 6 and 7, where we could add a couple of, say two parking stalls in there, and then remove 2 from the Mount Vista end. So that would be quite easily accommodated.
Right, you can add another tree in there or something. Yeah. Okay. So then I'm seeing those four recommendations. Consider ways to individualize the buildings and or entries to the units. Consider a marked pedestrian path along the south drive aisle. Consider ways to add more trees, especially larger growing trees and plants throughout the site. And consider redistributing the visitor parking. Any others that I missed? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the proposal as presented with approval of with these four recommendations and approval of the variances? Do you want to make that motion? Kate? Okay, and seconder? Jason? All in favor? Very good. It's passed.
Thank you, everybody, for your time and thoughtful commentary. Have good luck with the last one.
You're welcome.
Well done. Well done, Darren.
Jill? Oh. Were you wanting to say something? Oh, you're just saying bye. Okay. Great. Okay, we'll move on to our last presentation for the evening. And this is a project on Kenworth Road, and Sadie Robinson again will introduce this. Go ahead, Sadie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The third and final item on the agenda this evening is Development Permit 1251. This is a development permit application for the property at 2355 Kenworth Road. The property is 0.8 hectares in size, and the applicant is proposing a Hyundai car dealership. The property is zoned Core 3, Community Corridor, and the car dealership use is permitted as a site-specific use. The property falls within Development Permit Area 9 for the commercial use, and the General Development Permit Area guidelines apply to the development. Variances are proposed to increase the maximum allowable setback from 6 meters to 21.7 meters. The Core 3 zone also requires that at least 50% of the building face be set back a maximum of 6 meters. Thus, a variance is also proposed for this requirement. A variance is proposed for the location of the parking to allow parking spaces in the front yard setback area. In addition, variances are proposed to the minimum required landscape buffer along the south and west property lines from 1.8 meters to 0 meters. The applicant may now begin their presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint presentation. Share. Perfect. Good evening. My name's Alan Lowe. I'm the architect for this project. And also with me tonight is Stefan Luchinger from Design North Landscape Architecture, as well as Scott Lewis from Applin Martin. We're here to present the development permit application for the Wheaton Hyundai on Kenworth. This is the old Medill properties, and there are four car dealerships along that street at this point. The Victoria Specialty Cars opened, I think, about 6 months ago. We're working on the Nanaimo Mitsubishi right across the street at this point. And I understand Galaxy Motors has a building that is being proposed next to that. We're across the street from those three car dealerships. And this is the Wheaton Hyundai in Nanaimo. This is the site that we're looking at, and it's along Kenworth Road, and is right across the street from the car dealerships that we were just talking about. This is a plan from our civil consultants, Scott Lewis from Applin Martin, and the reason why I put this plan up is to share with you that there is a right-of-way along the this portion of the site here, and there was I guess a drainage storm sewer area going along this side, and we're creating a easement coming down across the front of the property to connect with the sanitary sewer here. And there are some I guess it's quite a low area there, and we had to make sure that the storm sewer actually the sewer connection actually met the sewer connection that is along Kenworth at that location. Scott will probably speak a little bit further about it, and that is why our building is set back the way that we have it. I apologize for the different orientation of the plans, but in looking at our site plan here, we actually have Kenworth along this side of the page, and we have two entrances into our site. The building itself has a service drive-through that is along this portion of the building here, as well as the main storefront, showroom, offices and part storage, and then the service area at the back. And this is just the floor plan showing the service bays in the back, showing the service drive-through and the showroom. The second floor, we have some offices, boardroom, a lunchroom, and as well, there is a tenanted space for office in the back of this building on the second floor as well. The building itself needs to meet the corporate image that Hyundai has for their car dealerships, and we've tried to make the building fit in with the area as well, and with the other car dealerships across the street. They have this fascia that is a ACM panel. The service drive-through, we're also creating the ACM panels there with the storefront glazing. This is the front entrance look that they have for the Hyundai car dealerships, and this has a canopy over top of it so that this door is recessed. We have tilt-up panels that are painted concrete for our service bays. Along the side here, you'll see the ACM panels actually coming around the corner, as well as having some non-wavy ACM panels along the side here. This is corrugated metal around the side of the building on the other side. And you will also see that there is a wave pattern for the bronzed ACM panels that are actually along the fascia. And this is an element that goes around three sides of the building. You'll see the curtain wall going around three sides of the building as well for the showroom. And just a few images of the building along Kenworth. This is the existing driveway crossing that was built in the master plan, and this is how this is one of the entrances into the site. The other entrance into the site is along this driveway crossing that's already existing, and this is how we get into the service drive-through, as well as going around the back of the site. This is the landscape plan, and I'm going to let Stefan talk a little bit about his landscape plan at this point.
Hey, thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. So the landscaping, with this being a car dealership, like the views into the site, onto the inventory and the building are important. And so we decided to use as a tree, like the Persian ironwood, a tree that's actually used for some other car dealerships along that road as well. And I believe also for the Haven House project just to the east of it. So a tree that will tie into some surrounding landscaping. And then we also do have a bioswale in that 4.5 meter wide front yard along Kenworth Road. So that's Scott can maybe then talk to that a little bit. That's a little bit of a natural feature. But with this linear bioswale and the linear tree planting, it kind of lends, this front yard lends itself to some sort of a linear arrangement of then lower shrubs and some ornamental grasses, so that different textures, different foliage, different color, different height. So that's what we try to achieve with nothing too tall, so to keep these views into the dealership open, and also for septet, no hiding places also to create that. And yeah, other than that, like so that would be the front yard. Other than that, that's some of the plant material we are using, the Persian ironwood, some Norway maple in these two islands along the west. Along the south, we have two larger parking islands where we would like to use some coniferous trees, some coniferous or some evergreen plant material. And you also see some of the shrub material that we're using in the front yard here and the ornamental grasses. I think that's about it, Alan.
Yeah, if you want to talk about your Persian ironwoods, etc., but you already have. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to the civil plan and have Scott make a few comments, please.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Alan's done as best of his job as he could at explaining the servicing. I do understand he is an architect and it's not really his forte, but I'll take it from here. And he's got it pretty close. So what we have is the constraints we had on this site when it was set up originally, and we were involved in the original development, is the sanitary sewer that Alan had alluded to, that it starts on Kenrick and runs sort of diagonally across the site and then turns and goes up towards the west property boundary, right? That sanitary sewer, the light one.
This way.
No, now come to the center.
Okay.
Now go straight down.
Okay.
And then it goes to the right.
Okay.
Okay, so that's an existing live sanitary sewer.
There you go.
Due to grades, it's at a minimum grade right now. So in order to position this building, we have to relocate the sanitary. So in order to relocate that sanitary, we had to make that length that Alan just alluded to there exactly the same length, because we're at minimum grade. So we've basically done the best job as we possibly can by trying to relocate that sanitary and be able to position the building. And that's ultimately why the building's back typically further than we would normally find, and it's that constraint that we had to deal with. Now, from the stormwater management point of view, this site is tributary to all of the properties on Bowen Road, and the drainage just comes out of underneath the wall and runs across this site, and you can see the swale that's running through. So what we're doing, we're actually involved in the project to the east of this, and we're working the two of the designs together right at the present moment. I've already been through a design panel with you guys. I'm not sure if all the members are on it, but what we're doing is we're extending that existing storm system up to connect, and that's just going to be a continuation to service upstream tributary area that's coming at the site that they have to deal with. And then what we're going to do is, if you come down to where the swale ends there at the bottom there, go to your left there, Alan. Go left.
Go left.
Go left, where the swale comes out of our site.
Okay, sorry.
So what we've done is we are actually going to tie into the new system, and the storm detention component is going to be a detention pipe that's going to run up and then all the way across. We have to maximize the length, and we also pick up catch basins, right? So that's the detention component of the site. And the second component of the city and Nanaimo specifications is a retention. So if you look over on the other side of the site, we're utilizing that area, and that's the honeycombed area there. That's underground retention. And as Stefan also alluded to, we had the opportunity, the way that we created the site was to create a bioswale. So that bioswale actually connects back into the pipe, which ends up into the retention system. And then we have another service from the original subdivision that connects onto Kentworth Road there. So it's a little bit more of a complicated site, just to deal with all the existing constraints and the way that it was originally set up. But I think we've managed to accomplish everything based on the rules that we have to follow, and it's actually worked out pretty good. I think the storage requirements, I always like to tell you guys, I'm not sure, do you have my calculation page there?
No, I don't. I didn't.
don't. Oh, anyways,
No.
so there's, as I've shown before, there's a whole calculation page, and I think we're retaining, I think roughly 40 cubic meters of storm sewer within the detention pipes with a controlled outfall or outlet within the system. And our retention component, because this site is so large, it's around 240, which is quite a significant amount. So, but we've been able to achieve that. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And Scott, could you talk a little bit about this easement here?
Oh, that's the existing sanitary sewer that is currently existing. It is servicing the properties to the east of this, and also right up to the corner property, which is Haven House, the existing Haven House. So what we've had to do as a part of our parking lot design, we've had to, and there's a retaining wall that's going to be extended along there. We're working with the structural engineer. I've been working with Dean Musso at the city. We've come up with a plan to locate the retaining wall and be able to maintain that sanitary sewer because it's within a statutory right of way owned by the city of Nanaimo. So we have to continue to allow them access, but we've got all the details worked out. And if anyone's got any questions, I can answer them.
And that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Okay, first of all, do any of the panel members have questions for staff on this one? Okay, let's see any. So just we've got 3 variance requests here. So just take note of that. There's front yard setback, location of parking, and a minimum landscape treatment. So keep those in mind when you're doing your comments, perhaps. Maybe we'll start with Tony.
I was hoping you wouldn't, because I'm still struggling here as to what we can actually deal with. It seems to me, from what I've heard, that the site servicing are dictating where the building goes and where it doesn't go, and puts the limits on it there in terms of the site plan. And then when you factor in Hyundai's corporate requirements for colors, materials, and signage and so forth, I'm not sure we're equipped to argue with the mighty Hyundai Corporation, even if we wanted to. But the only thing that has occurred to me is that it would be nice if somehow there could be more trees, more landscaping. I know these are car dealerships, and I know they have to have acres of cars on display. But I mean, the reality is that buying a car is not an impulse drive-by. Oh, hey, Martha, let's go buy a car. Let's go look at the Hyundai dealership or whoever. You know where you're going, and you probably, maybe got an appointment. I don't know, but whatever. So the fact that, adding a few more trees and some more landscaping to not just this car dealership, but all of them, it seems to me it would just, just take the edge off the, acres of cars and asphalt that these facilities inevitably, express themselves at. And I guess that's more of a philosophical thing than anything else. So frankly, I'm not sure where to go with that. Maybe others on the panel or could be a little more articulate or something than I, but I think that's the only thing that I have to say about this. Otherwise, the building itself is a nice, clean, contemporary looking building. The colors are good, the materials are good, and I think given all the constraints, I think Alan's done a hell of a good job here, along with a lot of help, I'm sure, from Scott. So well done, and I think I'm going to stop speaking right now. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tony. Well, maybe we'll segue over to Kate and have her comment. I'm sure she'll have something to say about trees.
Well, I was struggling the same as Tony. I find car dealerships so hard to comment on because I want to see more plants and trees because you have so much asphalt. Yet that goes against how you want to take care of those cars and what you want to keep off of those cars and all of that. So I don't know. I don't know, but I'm wondering, because you don't have the buffers, the landscape buffers that are required, I'm assuming you explored the possibility of having them and you just don't have the room. Is that correct?
Actually, not. The reason why we don't have the landscape buffer along where the easement is because, you know, if we're going to be, and we were actually talking with city staff about that as well. If we planted shrubs or even larger trees or whatever there, and if one needed to have access to that right of way, it would be very difficult and you would have to take everything out. And with any pipes along there, you didn't really want all the roots to come down into those pipes either. So that was the main reason why we didn't do that. And we brought out a couple islands of landscaping there so that we would kind of compensate for not having the buffer, and essentially right there, the buffer didn't really do a whole lot in the fact that the neighboring property is a lot higher than our property, and there's an existing retaining wall there.
Okay, so maybe to try to improve the buffer along the St. John's ambulance property line might be worth looking at.
Actually, there is no buffer required.
On that one. It's the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still could provide it. Anyway, I don't know. I would like to see more like, I'm happy you have that swale. That's kind of the saving this whole development. I think that that's sort of been a feature that's reoccurring, and it saves the streetscape a bit. And so I'm happy for the setback because we have that nice generous swale with trees. But I would love to not see that. Like you could put in perennial grasses, and they're not a huge expense, and they can be dug up and moved. There are some plants that can go in that can be sacrificed if the right of way needs to be accessed. But yeah, I don't know. I just so much asphalt. I'd like to see more trees. That's all I can say, but I don't know how. Okay, that's all I have to say. But I think the building is very nice, and it's nice for what it's doing. It has a nice presence and clean and that kind of thing. So I'll stop now.
Thanks, Kate. Jason, would you like to weigh in there? I'll have another comment from another architect here.
I will, and don't worry, Tony, you're not alone in not knowing where to begin. But so my only real comment is I actually agree with Kate as well. I think there's more opportunities for some landscaping, and I think the mechanism to do so would be, I think, as far as I understand, there is a variance requested for that buffer, that 1.8 meter buffer along the west and the south property line. And I guess I would be in favor of the variance on the west side, but not the south side, because the south side looks like you could easily accommodate that 1.8 and still maintain all of the turning radius and maneuverability you need to along the back side there. But I understand along the issues with the easement and the retaining wall and just, drive aisle clearances and the ability to actually fit all of the program within the site. But along the south, you don't have that constraint. So I would just simply say I am not in support of the variance along the south side of the property. Other than that, no other further comments.
Great, thanks, Jason. Angela.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, my Zoom went funny and I can't see anybody, and I missed out on some of the presentation, but that's okay. It is a interesting site in that there isn't a lot of flexibility with design. The building looks nice. So my initial thought was that this project could enhance the landscaping above and beyond what might be offered, just also to compensate for that that retaining wall, that easement area that won't have the buffer. There isn't a landscaping buffer required along the St. John's property line, but maybe that's something that could just be offered in lieu of. I don't see why not. There, like Kate says, there is a lot of space. I don't know how the drive aisles might be affected if you increase the buffer there with vegetation and trees. But just, I think it is something that's important to explore. I thought that along the sidewalks, it would be nice to have a couple nice benches, maybe some natural wood benches along there. I think that's just enhance the pedestrian experience if somebody wanted to have a seat, if they're bike riding or walking. And, there is a historically significant site in terms of the Medill industrial building was there for many years and was sort of a stakeholder in the economy for a long time. And I thought there was an opportunity to potentially install some kind of tribute to the Medill history of Nanaimo, and maybe it's an art installation, I don't know, but just maybe something to consider discussing as part of the project. And I think that's all I have to say. The variances, I think I'm generally in support of the variances based on the constraints of the site, but it would be nice to think that, sort of a give take that you could enhance more of the landscaping. And thank you.
Great, thanks, Angela. Kevin, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You have me?
Yep.
Can you hear?
I don't see you, but I hear you.
Oh, can you see me now?
It says Kevin.
Oh, I have it. Oh.
A picture of a desk or something, I don't know.
Oh, wow. I guess I dropped my phone and maybe it screwed everything up. Maybe I should reboot. But anyways, yeah, thanks for the presentation. I'm very familiar with this site for two reasons. One is my office is in the building directly to the west. And so I've looked down into the site over the last 30 years, many times. And really, there's nothing there on the side of my building that's of any concern. It's basically all loading bays and garbage bins. It's basically all that's down that side. So I'm not concerned at all about the variance for the landscape treatment level there on the west side of the property, because there's a huge retaining wall that comes up to our site, and any sort of landscape treatment level we probably wouldn't see anyways. It's not going to do anything to protect. If anything, this site probably wants to protect itself from looking at our building because it's a really old, ugly building. So I think that's something that I'm not concerned about. I agree with Angela's comment about adding something from the Medill history to the site. My father-in-law worked there for many years as a machinist, and you can, in the front yard, you can put some public art in the way of a large gear or something like that to just provide a little bit of history to the site. I think that's a great idea. The siding of the building, I have problems with. Scott, did you say that the building cannot move closer to the street?
No, we're limited on that pipe, that sanitary sewer pipe. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, unfortunately I'm on my phone, so.
Okay, just let me see, so I can get here's my actual detailed design drawing. So.
Yeah, because my drawing didn't show any sort of easements on it.
So right now, see what happened was this was one lot before, and this was one lot. And then what happened is just at the end of this development, they did a property boundary adjustment. So the property line now goes this way and here.
Mm.
Right? So this used to be all one lot, and we had everything all figured out. The storm was going to come through here. But with just the way that the owners of the subdivision and the deals that they had in place, they ended up creating this new lot here. Well, this is the existing sanitary sewer which services your building, runs through here, right?
Okay.
Okay, so in order to put this building here, we got to get this sanitary out of the way. So what we've done is this length here matches this length because our minimum grade through there. And then this length here matches this one. So I'm able to relocate this sanitary sewer out of the way of the building. And I can't go much farther than this, right? Because we got all of these other constraints in order to get all of these pipes through. So that ends up pushing the building back, right? So
yes, you can't even get it even closer to the street.
Yeah,
there's no ways to get it to work.
No.
And don't say costly. Are there any ways to get it to work?
No, because then we won't, this sanitary sewer won't meet, it won't flow the way it's supposed to.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's ultimately an engineering.
Yeah.
Problem, right. Yeah.
There's no other way you can rework that around the other side of the building or anything.
No.
Okay.
Where was it? This sanitary sewer doesn't exist here anymore. So it used to run up through here, right? And then what we did as a part of this development, actually used to run all the way through here, and then the way we move things around, we rerouted it here to here. And actually it services the sanitary from Laird Wheaton comes into here, and now it services here. This services all the lots up into here and down through here. So it's
okay.
I'm just limited on grade, right? So it's as flat as the pipe can go based on the city specs, and if after that engineering won't accept it.
Okay, thanks. I wish there was something that could have been done because you build a building and it should be your advertisement, not vehicles parking in the front, and you can be guaranteed that there'll be cars with for sale signs on them in the front, and that's happened to a lot of other buildings, car dealerships in town, but I just feel like the building should be the focal point, not the cars, and but yeah, there's nothing that can be done with that. But
so there we go. There's the sanitary sewer. That's minimum grade at 0.5%, right? Okay. So we're as flat as we can possibly go to get around this, right?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Scott.
I tried I remember when it started coming up, and I sort of red flagged this to everyone. I'm like, hang on here a second, just to let you know, hey, we got this pipe we have to deal with, right? So this was basically the only solution. And I've talked about it with Dean Mousseau. I talked about it with Graham Trimmer as well. Like we've hashed this out on an engineering level, probably for well over a year, right? So we had to make sure it all worked before they even started getting into this. So I presented this to them long time ago, right, about relocation of that sanitary, and they were on board with it. So
okay, thanks, Scott. As far as form and character, it is what it is. We always have these corporate image things when it comes down to car dealerships and restaurants and stuff like that. And I think if this was in a more, urban setting, like if it was downtown, we'd probably ask for a little bit more to meet with, downtown guidelines and stuff. So it is what it is. I think Alan, you did a good job with materials and transparency of the building and everything. So I'm totally fine with that. With the landscape concept, I think Stephanie did a good job with how you, the landscape components relating to the street and the depth of it. I think you did a good job with that. I agree with some of the other comments about increasing the buffer between on the south property, even if it's not required, and also increasing the density or the robust nature of it, as city staff put it, on the east property line relative to the residential building that's going to be built there. So I would definitely recommend those two things. And again, I think you don't really need to worry. I would support the variance relating to the west property line. I I'm still struggling with the parking in front of the building and the front setback, but if there's nothing you could do about it, I'm still not going to support those two. But with respect to the minimum landscape treatment level, I would support the variance with the along the west property line. And aside from that, if it's impossible, like you say, to move the building closer to the street, I would recommend that you look at a textural hardscape change along the front of the building, connecting the two drive aisles that come in, whether it's paving stones, just something different to give it a little bit more than all the asphalt on the site. I think you can do something with that as a trade-off to the front setback variance and the parking variance. So other than that, I think you did a good job. So thanks for the presentation.
Great, and last but not least, Councillor Brown, maybe Tyler, you'd like to.
Yeah, no, so thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Scott, and I really appreciate you taking through us the constraints there, Scott, because it definitely does influence the design, that's very clear, or at least the siting. Yeah, I appreciated Jason's comments there. I have a hard time supporting the variance on that particular lot line for the landscape buffer, and then the other, I would fully support the other comments around finding opportunities to incorporate more landscaping. I think it's especially crucial on these particular lots where there is a lot of asphalt. I do note the staff comment just around consider adding electrical EV charging stations. I actually think that's pretty important for what the proponent car company here has been going for with their how they've been electrifying and really meeting that demand. So I just note that because I think it's a pretty natural fit for the branding and the marketing of the company, and just made good sense. The only other, oh yeah, I really struggle every time I hear that corporate branding guidelines somehow take precedent over community guidelines. And I know this is just a general comment. I can't imagine what it must feel like as an architect to hear those words, but I would really hope that as we go through the OCP process here in Nanaimo, that our new development permit guidelines explicitly make a comment that corporate guidelines will not trump community design considerations, because that's what seems to happen. So other than that, Alan, I think you've done a good job with the branding constraints, but also the sort of the engineering constraints on the site. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Tyler. Okay, so what do we have here? First of all, yeah, thanks for your presentation, Alan and Stefan and Scott. Unusual, difficult property, obviously, and difficult constraints. So I can't really add anything to it. I just agree with the different recommendations. So I think I'll just skip over to trying to figure out what our recommendations will be for this project. So I'm hearing for sure consider finding opportunities to add more landscaping and trees. Kate, were you wanting to say something?
Oh, yes, and I see Tony's hands up too, but I think I just wouldn't mind 100% clarity on where the landscape buffer is required and not, and which property lines. And actually, if I could ask Scott, your drawing revealed something to me with the adjacent property, residential property that shall not be named, mm-hmm. And part of its site relationship to this site. And so I just wondered, can I ask him to show that drawing again? Is that okay, Marie?
Do you want to see what Scott's engineering drawing again?
Yes, because it shows something.
Yeah, it shows the neighbor's building, right?
Yes. That one that shall not be named, I think. Is that right?
So the development permit drawings didn't show that, but my engineering drawings, which I have, which has a little bit more detail, does show that. So
yeah. What struck me was the amenity space for that residential building is right in that sort of right there. That amenity space is right on that edge. And so then that buffer becomes even more important in understanding that that's where that amenity space is located, which is meant to have children and, you know, other residents. So I just wanted to kind of bring that point up. And so is that that property line buffer is not required? We need a 1.8 meter buffer. There. That's one of the variants.
I'm not the expert in this. I think it's more Alan, but I think it's the same zone, right?
Yeah.
It's the same zone, and
you don't require the buffer.
Yeah.
Okay, but that seems like it's the most important buffer.
Yeah. And I think that as we get into the details of this, there's a good chance it will get dealt with.
Okay, so then I guess I'm sorry,
Excuse
Marie,
me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
May I offer a point of clarification?
Sure, that'd be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Through the chair, I understand that a 1.8 meter landscape buffer would be required along the south and the west property lines and not the east property line adjacent the property that Kate is speaking about right now.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was afraid of, but it seems that it's the most important one. Okay, thank you for sharing your drawing again, Scott. It was just really revealing to me.
That's good notice. I'm glad
We
you saw that.
we are fortunate enough that I'm working on both sites, so I'm familiar with what's happening on one. And unfortunately, Alan is not working on both sites on this one because it's a different architect, but I'm involved in. And well, the only comment I say is we're working both sites together, so it's going to work at the end of the day, right?
Okay.
They're both Island West Coast projects, right? So I'm involved in the design teams from that.
Sure. Okay.
Two different architects, right? Two different managers as well too. I'm the only common consultant at this point between the two of them, right? So.
Okay.
But I know your comments are, and we are going to work this together because we've got one design and we have the other one. We got to make sure it all works at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Lania, were you wanting to say something? I saw your.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to just add to Sadie's comment. I suppose is just as she noted the variances that are required. Certainly hearing the comments, and we always do look at the surrounding context with, explore through the more comprehensive part of this application review any opportunities to increase landscape buffering to be sensitive to the surrounding context.
Great, thanks. And Tony, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question for Alan, for the architect. I'm somewhat facetious in this, but my heart is in it. I would like to ask if your client has ever considered or would consider being the first Hyundai dealership in the world to have a green roof as some sort of compensation for the lack of landscaping elsewhere on the site. So I'll just leave it out there as that.
And you didn't want me to comment on that, did you, Tony?
I kind of anticipate what your answer will be, but I just had to get that off my chest. Yes. So there it is.
Comment noted. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Tony.
All right. Well, we've had a fair amount of discussion here, and I'm trying to sort out our recommendations for this project. I'm still seeing consider finding opportunities to add more landscaping and trees, especially along the south property line, or do we want to designate the property line and just say add more landscaping and trees wherever feasible?
Marie, this is Kate. I thought Lania said it in a very nice way, actually, just to consider ways to increase the landscape buffer where they can.
Okay.
I would just jump in. I think we need to be more specific. I think we need to increase the landscape buffer along the south and east property lines, and along the east property line make the landscape elements more robust to help screen it from the residential property next door. And we can also add in, well, if we're increasing it, we're obviously adding more landscape elements. So I'm not sure if we need to go much further than that, or if anybody else has a recommendation. But for me, it's really the south and more importantly, the east property lines that I think that need more concern. The west one, like what I said, that's against my building, and a landscape buffer is going to do nothing because the retaining wall is like 10 feet, 12 feet tall. So.
Well, how about consider finding ways to increase the landscape buffer where possible, especially along the south and east property lines, with the east buffer being more robust. Is that too complicated?
Yeah, I like that.
Everybody else okay with that? Okay. And let's see, there was a couple other recommendations. I'm not sure if the recommendations are just comments. So Angela, perhaps you could clarify. You mentioned some benches on the sidewalk. I'm not sure which sidewalk that was. And also we had mentioned some historical references. I don't know that adding some historical reference to the Madel history. And Kevin, you mentioned some paving stones or making some paving stones along some sidewalk, but I'm not sure which one. So if you could clarify those. Do you want those as recommendations?
I would definitely like the textural hardscape change along that connect the two driveways that come in, running through the front of the building, especially if they're going to get a variance for the parking in the front and also a front setback. So I think just for that, even though it's not it wasn't their problem that happened. I really think that could help to break up some of the asphalt that would be on the site. And I agree with Angela's comment of adding some public art to add to the history of the Medill site would really be something that can add into that front yard that would really be really special for it. So I totally agree with it if Angela still agrees.
Yes, thank you. I didn't realize I'm still unmuted. I'm having Zoom issues right now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So Did you want that as a recommendation?
Yeah. I did mean the seating along the Kenworth Road, and the Medill, some kind of homage to the history of Medill, some kind of installation. Yes, what Kevin said. Thank you.
Okay, so consider adding benches and the public art installation along Kenworth. Public art installation recognizing Medill.
The art installation or some kind of tribute. I don't anywhere that's. I don't think it has to be along Kenwell, but.
Okay. So the benches are along Kenworth.
Yeah. Kenworth.
Okay. And Kevin, maybe you could phrase something about the public art and that you mentioned and the sidewalks. If you could give me a phrasing here.
Yeah. Well, not the sidewalks, but I already did the paving one, right? The textural change in the drive aisle. You got that one, right?
Nope.
No. Yeah, that would be consider a textural change, possibly considering paving stones. Connecting in front of the building, connecting the two driveway entrances to the site. And then consider adding public art to reflect the history of the Medill site.
Excuse me, Marie, this is Kate. I have a point I'd just like to bring up. I don't have a problem with saying if we want them to consider somehow referencing the history of the site, but I don't want that to be attached to public art. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can dictate what public art is in that specific way. That makes sense?
Yeah,
and
I agree with you.
As an example, through public art, consider the history, adding something from the history of the Medill site, for example, as through public art.
Well, I think Angela said add a tribute.
A tribute. Okay.
Some sort of tribute to reflect the history of the Medill site.
Okay, I'll go with that.
That gets rid of the art part. Okay, gets more complicated. Okay, so what I'm hearing then is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations. So to consider finding ways to increase the landscape buffer where, especially along the south and east property lines, with the east buffer being more robust. Consider a hardscape change. Oh, no, I guess I don't have that one. Okay. Consider adding benches along Kenworth. Consider textural changes in the drive aisle connecting the 2 driveway entrances to the site. Consider adding some sort of tribute to reflect the history of the Medill site. Tyler?
Yeah, I think those all sound good, and I don't think I'm able to move the motion, but I think I would highly support for those motions, plus support for the variances, with the exception, I think, of the what is it? Is it the southern lot line landscape variance?
Jason mentioned that. Which was it? The one we weren't.
Is southern or western? The western one is the one up against my building. And there's no need for a landscape buffer there. That was the one that I was most worried about. But
so the southern, yeah.
The western.
Could I ask for clarification?
Sure.
I don't know this site as well as everybody who lives in Nanaimo, but I wonder who would be sitting on these benches.
People contemplating buying a car, maybe. Or pedestrians.
Is that a public sidewalk? I'm assuming
it is, yeah.
They might be thinking about buying a car, and they might be thinking about putting an offer on it. They need somewhere to sit.
Underneath some trees.
If this is a heavy pedestrian route somewhere, maybe I could understand it. If there were shops and restaurants and all kinds of stuff. But in this particular context, I seriously wonder if we aren't being a little frivolous here by sort of throwing benches at the applicant for no really serious substantive reason. It's not a big number, a big deal or anything like that. I know, but before we just toss it out there, I would vote against it, but I don't know any better. So I'm looking for the rest of the panel to provide support for rationale for benches.
Sorry, this is Kate again. I was contemplating the same thing, and then I wondered, because of the improvement to Kenworth and the nice, generous boulevards and sidewalks, is it being used more by pedestrians? I don't really know.
Tyler?
The only thing I think would justify it is, the Bowen Road is obviously one of the main transit lines. There is the BC, there is the BC government buildings there, just further down the street. So I would have a tough time making the case that if the benches are crucial for terms of pedestrian traffic, other than some folks that might have mobility issues that would be taking the bus going to those buildings. But then I think you're probably into the custom transit there rather than the conventional transit type of transportation, anyways, if there is those mobility issues. So I struggle with this recommendation. I think that Tony highlighted, it's not a huge expense. But I don't think it's a high pedestrian route. I think it has increased, obviously, but even from a mobility, it runs completely parallel to the Inn and Trail, right? So that is your active transportation corridor. So I think a struggle.
Sorry, go ahead, Angela.
Maybe to the applicant, is there anywhere for the employees to sit outside and have a coffee?
At this point, no. They do have a staff room, and there is, if they want to go for a walk, there is the Inn and Trail, like the councillor has said. It is not a highly pedestrian area at this point. So,
if I can just jump in, it really isn't from a residential standpoint, but every time my wife and I would go car shopping, I would normally park at my office right on Bowen Road, and we would walk to the Mazda dealership, then the Honda dealership, then the Toyota dealership, and then the Kia dealership, and then the Mitsubishi. So you'll probably find a lot more people parking maybe up off of Bowen Road somewhere and walking around to all these dealerships. And so I think it's going to be the need, and what Angela mentioned too about, the people that work there. You have that nice sidewalk coming in right through the middle of the site. And if you, just maneuver some of the landscape, softscapes around it and put a couple of benches there, I think it's a good idea. So I fully support it. Thank you.
Jason, you had your hand up.
I would just say that I think maybe adding benches to the front is contrary to our ask for additional landscaping and trees. It's because it's going to replace that on the site. And so maybe instead of at the front, we push that into the 1.8 meter setback on the south side where the employees can enjoy their breaks.
How about this? Consider places on the site for benches. Anyway, I'm not sure where I sit on that. I don't think we usually ask the applicants to put benches on the public sidewalk. So I'm a little concerned about that. If it's part of their amenity space and they have to have an amenity space, then we can ask for it. So it's rather awkward. And I'm thinking we've made this suggestion. They've heard it, and there maybe they can take it from there, but maybe not make it a formal recommendation. So I'm not sure where we're at here. Is that would that be appropriate for everybody in our panel? Okay, so we'll just take that one off. Is that okay, Angela?
Yeah.
Okay. So Tyler had a motion on the floor. Would you like to just amend that? So there's just three recommendations at this point now, and you were trying to figure out how to say about the variance, the landscape buffer variance. Do we need to edit that and say we support part of it and not all of it?
I don't actually know, again, Marie, if I'm actually allowed to move motions or vote on them or whatever. I'm still figuring that out. But if I am, I would move, as Kevin says, we accept the application as presented with the recommendations you outlined. And I would say I'm still not clear on the lot line. I'm just trying to, that we support the variances with the exception of that. Not the one that Kevin was talking about, but the other one where
okay.
So you're recommending that the south elevation, the one up against the ambulance, be removed from it? From
the variance not be supported for it. I just trying to pull up the.
But what about the west elevation up against my building? Like, I don't think we need a buffer there, do we?
No, so the variance would be supported. So it would be removal to support the variances with the exception of the variance requested for the minimum landscape treatment level along the south rear property lot line.
Well, okay. So we'll hope the recording secretary got that. Okay. So Tyler's put the motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Jason, all in favor? Done. Okay. Well, thank you, Alan, Scott, and Stefan. Great presentation, and good luck with the project.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. And to the group here, we don't have any other business. So can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Before you do, Marie, I think I'm not sure if this is going to be a new method of having city staff, instead of being in the boardroom, doing it the way it is. But I just found that doing it this way, there's much more clarity when I hear the voice compared to using that mobile audio unit or whatever. And I felt that everybody from city staff came in very, very clear. And I think this method worked really well. So hopefully, I'm not sure if Lania can explain whether or not this is something we're going to do in the future, but I thought it worked very, very well.
Yeah, it was a big improvement.
Madam Chair, I think that we will be continuing with this format as an option for sure.
Great. And have we come to any conclusions on our meeting? There was a meeting change for the our next meeting, the 24th. 24th is being canceled.
Madam Chair, the 24th is being canceled, and we will, if we haven't already sent out a message to confirm, we were exploring March 2nd as an option, I believe, but there was a couple of options, so we will certainly follow up to confirm that date.
Okay, so everybody can look forward to an update on that. And yeah. Okay, that's it. Motion to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Second.
Thank you. Yeah.